Welcome to This Day Live, the Sunday talk show where we discuss all things political, bringing you the top stories locally, nationally, and from around the world. I'm Ruben Abati, and This Day Live begins now. I'm Ruben Abati, your host for This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. I'd like to welcome our special guest for today. Of course, ladies first, we have Yemi Adamolekun, the Executive Director of Enough is Enough. She's here to join the conversation today. Also joining us is the former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, Professor Bola Akintenrewa. And of course, our resident guest, Deputy Editor at This Day on Sunday, Olawale Olaleye, is also here.
Good evening, sir.
And later on in the show, we'll be joined by our favorite budget specialist and CEO of Economic Associates, Ayo Teriba. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us. We have quite a bit to talk about today, so let's get right into it with the top stories of the week. Wale, you usually give us the rundown. What's been happening in Nigeria and around the world?
Well, like every other week, last week too, came with its own peculiar characters. As of this morning, the Independent National Electoral Commission announced that, this afternoon rather, that the incumbent governor of Anambra State eventually won the election. So congratulations to the Anambra people. In the week, something very sad happened. The 26 Nigerian ladies who reportedly died in the Mediterranean Sea were buried without as much the presence of the Nigerian people and government there. That was sad. And yet the Italy government gave them a befitting burial, so I heard. The Senate now waits the presidential nominees for ministers as early as this week that we are already. In far away Zimbabwe, the emperor there, Mugabe, appears to have ended his reign eventually. I think from all indications, it is beginning to have a beautiful denouement, if you call it that way. Also, the former president, President Jonathan, denied in the week that he ever received any payment from the pension funds. The state of education in the country has continued to attract a bit of debate, especially given the situation in Kaduna State. And I'm aware that Borno too is following suit, in terms of assessment of the teachers. And I think the state of education is one thing that we should look at, in the course of our deliberations here. The court in the week stopped the Senate from further investigating the Inspector General of Police, whatever that meant, I don't know. Militants announced resumption of hostility in Niger Delta, sad. There was protest in Kwara against a senator's representation, which claimed about 5 people. But I think the situation is calm now. Okay, and then the son of former leader of APGA, that's Chief Odumegu Ojukwu, defected to APC. Unfortunately, regardless of that, APGA won in Anambra. So by and large, those were the highlights of the events that actually strewn last week. Well,
I mean, you seem to have left out something. There was a story also about the Nigerian government recruiting economic growth experts to offer advice as to the way forward in the economy. Maybe when Ayo Teriba comes on, he will deal with that. And then, of course, the situation in Anambra is something we'll look at in greater detail when we come back, when we get to that subject. Okay. Because I'm sure that a lot of people around the world would like to know how the Electoral Commission has performed in this case and what that indicates for the health of Nigeria's democracy. But let's go to Zimbabwe, where, there seems to be a developing story. Just last week, we were preparing for a potential Mugabe dynasty, as it were, with Grace Mugabe as the vice president, possibly. And just a week later, we're preparing for what seems like an inevitable impeachment of President Robert Mugabe. It's amazing, isn't it, how quickly the tide changes. And it's now been confirmed that President Robert Mugabe's own party has voted to oust him as its leader on Sunday, a day after thousands of Zimbabweans took to the streets to celebrate his stunning fall from power after a military takeover. The governing ZANU-PF party, which held emergency talks at its headquarters in the capital, Harare, to consider the fate of the president, who had ruled for 37 years, appointed the previously fired Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa as Mr. Mugabe's successor. Under the Constitution, Mr. Mugabe remains president, even if in name only. But if he does not resign by noon Monday, the committee members decided he will face impeachment by Parliament. Cheers, celebration, and dancing broke out in the building after the vote, according to a video shared on social media. Mugabe has resisted stepping down and was seeking to negotiate a dignified departure. However, the people have spoken, and it's clear they want Mugabe to resign and take a rest as an elder statesman. Now, what do you all think? But before then, we'll join our studio in London, where the story has been closely monitored, and then we'll get the details. Sam is joining us from London. Sam, are you there?
Yeah, we are in London. I can give you the updates with respect to what is happening in Zimbabwe. And I think you guys in Nigeria might be behind a little bit. The ink is done. The president of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, has always maintained that his own party, his own ZANU-PF party, the time that they say they don't want him anymore to lead his party, then that will be the time for him to leave. He has just finished meeting the army generals, the head of the police, the head of the prison services, the head of the Air Force, to say his goodbye. He has already had the broadcasting equipment ready to address the nation, and probably that is an address that will have a lot of interest globally. This is a man who is 93, who has been part of the politics in Zimbabwe and Africa for more than 6 decades. He came in 1957, 1958. He was one of the young generation Zimbabweans who was sent to Ghana to see how an African independent state operated. At that time, he studied what Kwame Nkrumah was doing and got married there. He wanted to go to London, of course, to study law and practice law, but then he was called back to Zimbabwe, spent more than a decade in prison, became part of the liberation struggle, and then became the leader of ZANU in 1977. So everything that he has always done, he has said that it was in the name of the party, and the mandate was one that was coming from the party. What has been behind his downfall, it is probably because he has maintained a principle that is quite unusual, that he did not want to appoint a successor. He didn't want to groom a successor. He didn't want to prescribe to the people within his own political ZANU-PF party who should succeed him. And as things have turned, his wife, Grace Mugabe, is only 52, decided to join a faction within ZANU-PF that was made of intellectuals, young generation politicians that are mostly in their 40s and 50s, the one that is called Generation 40 or G40. That Generation 40 group has lost out because the body that is the highest body between congresses, the Central Committee of ZANU-PF, has decided today that a lot of them must be expelled from the party, including Grace Mugabe. She's been expelled from ZANU-PF, the party. The likes of the education minister, Jonathan Moyo, the finance minister, Ignatius Chombo, the minister responsible for local government, Sevia Kasukuvere, the minister responsible for sports, Makosini Hlongwane, and many others. So what you have now is coronation for Emmerson Mnangagwa, and Robert Mugabe has stayed true to his word within the party.
So, Tham, how will you describe what has happened? Will you call it a revolution on behalf of the people or elite displacement within the ZANU-PF?
It is an internal ZANU-PF struggle. There has been, for quite a number of years, indications that at some point Robert Mugabe will no longer be available to lead ZANU-PF as a party. And this is a party that includes most of the people that fought during the liberation struggle. And of course, you have to include ZAPU, the party of Joshua Mqabuko Nkomo. But what you have had, so many groups, mainly three main groups, under former Vice President Joyce Mujuru, the Kamatox group, under Emmerson Mnangagwa, who is now taking over the Lacoste group, and then the G40 that was later, on the 11th hour, probably joined by the First Lady, Grace Mugabe. So these people, he allowed them to compete for the right to succeed him underneath him. And it would appear that at some point that issue culminated in Mnangagwa being fired. But then by the time Mnangagwa was fired, he got the sympathy of the nation, the opposition, and people within ZANU-PF, because the understanding at that point was it was no longer his credentials that got him to lose, or Lacoste to lose, but it was now the fact that he was competing against Grace Mugabe, who has a natural advantage in that she is also married to Robert Mugabe. But the generals, the army, when it moved in, it did make it a point that this was not a coup, because a coup is something that is against the SADC principles, just like it would be the case with ECOWAS in West Africa. But what they said was they had nothing against Robert Mugabe, the person, or the commander-in-chief or their leader, but they were targeting the G40 politicians who were around him, and that included his wife. So what is then once the military was in charge, having taken over power,
are we sure?
Now remain to be seen who their individual choice was, and Mnangagwa is the man.
Is it certain at this point that President Mugabe will resign? Is that what you said at the beginning? Or you will wait to be impeached?
I'm telling you, as a journalist that's covering Zimbabwe, we have a correspondent, TJ, on the ground. This is the case. It's not going to get to impeachment, because even if it was to go to impeachment, that's a totally different process. ZANU-PF Central Committee were well advised legally. They decided to keep Robert Mugabe as a member of the party. And the Constitution of Zimbabwe says that the next president, to finish off his term, which finishes in 2018, will be a member of the party to whom the president belongs. So this is a done deal. The generals just making a way. This is what is happening now, Ruben, is a process of, it's the ritual of how it works. This is someone that has respect from the people that has just decided to replace him with Emmerson Mnangagwa. Even as Emmerson Mnangagwa himself will continue to give that respect to Robert Mugabe.
Thank you very much, Tham. Thank you for joining us. That has been Tham from our studios in London. Now, panel, you listen to him, the update. How will you react to the situation in Zimbabwe? Let me start with you, Prof.
Thank you, Ruben. The report is quite interesting, but interesting to the extent that it raises some fundamental questions people, observers, analysts have not been addressing. One, it is said that it was not a coup. Rightly, yes, it's not a coup, but it's a coup d'etat. The fundamental difference between coup and coup d'etat is simply that coup is just about change. But coup d'etat is the use of force to change government.
Is anybody disagreeing with that?
We are told that it's not a coup. But
well,
that's the narrative
the soldiers themselves said it's not a coup.
Precisely, but I'm saying it's a coup d'etat. The second point is that the Zimbabwean situation clearly reflects the pattern of politics in Africa, in which there is permanently a conflict between the law and the wishes of the people. There has always been a conflict there. On the one hand, the African Union has it that under no circumstance will there be any change of government by force, by manu military. They wouldn't accept. But you also have, on the other hand, the generality of the people now seeking a change. Now you now see that while at the governmental level, constitutional level, legal level, you say you will not condone it. But the people now want a forceful change as it is in Zimbabwe. For instance, it is the military that actually removed, quote and unquote, Mugabe. The constitution of Zimbabwe, as Sam rightly pointed out, yes, now allowed for the completion of his tenure in office until 2018. Now, what has happened is that an elected president, people are talking about long stay in government, 37 years. How do you explain the fact that he had been consistently been elected?
Where he's notorious for rigging elections.
Exactly, and there's no opposition.
And for despotism.
Hold on. You see, the issue is this. When you acquiesce to something, whether you rig elections or otherwise, the moment you condone it,
who's condoning it?
The people.
Anyway,
no,
Prof, let me take you.
Hold on. We can't say Zimbabweans are condoning that. No.
Please, you see, African leaders, let me tell you, the issue is this. That's why we are always lagging behind in Africa. And that's why it has been very difficult since the time African countries have been acceding to national
I guess what is happening in Zimbabwe will send a strong signal to other dictators in Africa, or Equatorial Guinea, or Democratic Republic of Congo, or Togo,
or Uganda.
You know, or Uganda. In Togo, people have been saying they are tired of the Nyasimbe dynasty. Benjamin, you wanted to come in?
No, I think I was just disagreeing with Prof on the issue of Zimbabwe's acquiescing and the AU guidelines about a military not coming in. It assumes that there's opportunity for free and fair elections. I think we all anybody following Zimbabwe politics would agree that the elections have been anything but free, but not fair. So he's 93, 94, now wants his wife to succeed him. I think for me, it's a narrative around that I find a bit interesting. The fact that everybody was okay, like the boys in power. I mean, the narrative around the fact that Mugabe, the head of the military, and the vice president were all comrades, and everybody was okay with Mugabe in power until a woman now threatened the old boys club. And for me, I find that narrative very interesting because, yes, because of one role of how we perceive women in generally, I think globally, not just this part of the world, but how it was very easy for that to become the narrative rather than some of the other underlying issues around the VP's relationship with the head of the military, what transpired with the VP getting fired, President Mugabe just on his own deciding that VP, you're out, my wife would come in, and what that said in terms of the dynamics. So I found that spin of Mrs. Mugabe's power, quote unquote, quite fascinating.
No, so Wally, do you agree with this? Right. This whole theory of Lady Macbeth and Banquo's ghost, being the source of Mugabe's downfall?
No, I do not think so. I think it's just some kind of small screen for Mugabe's ultimate plan, drafting in the woman and then selling the narrative as if the wife was the problem. For me, really, in Zimbabwe, much as I'd like to congratulate them for seeing through to the end of his reign and then being able to manage the slant of the military as if it wasn't any serious coup or any serious problem. But I'm also worried that the man coming in, the VP, is not different from the clique, the cabal, so to speak, if you'll allow me to use that word, of the Mugabe reign. They've been together all along. So for me, if Zimbabwe truly desires to move forward, I think a new phase, an entirely new phase, should step in.
For the elections next year. So the agreement is that he...
Anyway, we have to move on.
Is that an agreement that will run?
We'll have to move on quickly from Zimbabwe.
Their choice not to vote for.
I think you are right to a great extent, and that's why I take my distance from your earlier point of submission. You see, the problem is not with Grace Mugabe. I do not think she is really the problem. The bitter truth is that the vice president, all right, who was removed, has his strongest connections with the military.
Yes.
They are in his support. The mere fact that he removed him, all right, was the source of bitterness.
Yes, absolutely.
Ever before the factor of Greece, the wife, Kwimi.
Yeah.
So this is the bitter truth.
But didn't he remove him to put in...
Anyway, I think that in the final analysis, Mugabe, Zimbabwe after Mugabe will become the focus after his exit.
Certainly, yes.
You know, it will be interesting to see whether what has happened represents change in terms of the circumstances of the people.
For the elections next year,
it's the people who matter most.
Yeah.
Anyway, at the end of the day. I mean, the economy is down, inflation is about 50%. There are potholes all over Zimbabwe.
Potholes.
The prospects...
Did you say potholes?
Potholes on the roads. The economy is in shambles. There is great disillusionment among the people. And the people are already jubilating because they believe that after Mugabe, there will be change, there will be progress.
So that's Wale's point. Elections next year, that's the real test.
So, but elections alone in themselves do not guarantee peace, progress, or stability.
Not at all.
So it will be interesting to see what happens. Now, we have our own situation in Nigeria. The elections have just been concluded in Anambra State. And Abgas Willie Obiano is said to have won the Anambra governorship election. Congratulations to him. Mr. Obiano won in all the 21 local government areas of the state, with a total of about 34,071 votes. He was followed by APC candidate Tony Nwoye. Oseloka Obaze of the PDP emerged third, while Osita Chidoka of the UPP came a distant fourth. The Afghan National Youth leader, Chuks Nwoga, has described the election as being free and fair. However, UPP candidate Osita Chidoka hinted at superior financial power being the reason he lost, stating he was approached and told to pay voters for their votes, but refused. Anambra's election goes down in history as being the governorship election with the highest number of candidates, 37 in all, in the highest in Nigeria's electoral history. Now, what do you guys think? Was there any foul play in this election outside of the reports that we have heard? What's your take?
I don't think so. I think largely it was a successful election. I saw his victory coming. Remember last week when we discussed them, I said he would win if on the basis of his performance. If he would run on his own record, he would win. Of course, I also alluded to his politics, which could be his undoing in the election. Of course, that didn't have as much impact as we have seen. Winning across the 21 local governments is a major one for him. Landline, if that is not contestable. Yeah, you said? but I was a bit worried when INEC delayed the announcement of the result. Of course, ahead of the elections, INEC had said there was going to be electronic transmission of results. So I was thinking with that, it was going to be seamless, and then we should have had the results by last night. And then we wouldn't go to press until like 4 a.m., and yet we had no clue. I think that's something INEC should look at. But by and large, I want to say congratulations to the people of Anambra for holding a relatively peaceful and free election, yeah. Yeah,
well, Yemi, you were in Anambra recently.
Yeah, we were there for the debates last week. Peaceful, yes. I'm not quite sure I would also target fair. I think INEC was very positive. The chairman met with civil society organizations a few weeks ago and was very positive about their level of preparation and what they had put on ground. If the delay and the challenges they had with logistics, NYSC, have anything to go by, are anything to go by, they're definitely not as prepared as they let on in terms of that. So it'll be interesting to see when they look back and they review the process, what the challenges are and what specific things they're going to put in place to mitigate that as Ekiti and Osun roll around next year. And then, I mean, vote buying. I think we saw that in Edo, ramped up in Ondo, and it seems to have ramped up yet again in Anambra. And if that's the trend for elections as we move forward, it's a very scary thought, because it just means people will be desperately looking for more money, and it would not be about anything they plan to do, anything they are promising, or their desire to serve the people. it will just be votes going to the highest
Really,
bidder.
there was so much talk about money exchanging and, you know,
and then
open negotiations.
Exactly.
But it will take ages for money to be divorced from our politics, really.
No, but it's gotten worse. I think this open
If it's going to take ages, you will admit it.
No, it's not that. For my own concern is that it's getting worse. So we've always talked about money.
It's poverty.
But we've always talked about money and politics. Yeah, but I mean, we've always talked about money and politics. But the 2,000 you get in one day...
It's just an increasing level of poverty.
Is it poverty or a question of integrity of the system itself?
Because there's a law against, sorry, sir, because it's actually illegal.
Yeah, I know it's illegal,
So
yeah.
there are
but people conduct this trade by barter, you know, during elections, and they seem to get away with it. Raising questions about the legitimacy of the outcome.
Exactly.
Prof. Yeah.
Yes, I will think that Yemi is right, but I'm agreeing on a different note completely. Every political system has its peculiarities. If money exchanging hands, you know, is, you know, Nigeria's mania of politicking, there is no particular, you know, perfect system of electing. Nigeria is Nigeria. We have a Nigeria-nomania style of politics.
Absolutely not acceptable.
Hold on. Acceptable to who?
Acceptable to everybody.
Please, you see, this is the problem. What obtains in UK, America, etc., is good. But there are many ways of defining the factor of Nigerianness in everything. If, for instance, people will give the impression that elections in France, in Britain, in America, when they are done there, it's okay. But scientifically, they rig elections.
We're not talking about rigging, right?
I'm coming. Okay. Just exercise patience.
Okay.
You see, this is the issue.
It is time.
Now, if people have to campaign by giving money to voters, even openly, that may be condemnable in itself.
On election day, at the polling booth.
Exactly. This is not at the rally.
I am coming.
No, they were calling them aside.
Yes, you see, the issue is
But on
that
election day.
who was arrested for doing that?
Nobody.
Now, people will steal ballot box. All right? The election for me...
Yeah, in one local government, in one polling booth, somebody attempted to steal it.
before it
was apprehended.
Yeah, it was led away.
Now, you see, the beauty of your point, with which I agree, is that, look, it points to brighter days to come.
How?
In Nigeria, yes, internationally. Factor one, IPOB campaigned, pleaded with people not to come out to vote. People came out and voted.
But still, we were told there was very low voter turnout.
I'm coming.
Yeah.
And IPOB has been jubilating.
Very low.
It managed
to keep people at home.
Very low.
You see,
well, that's what IPOB is claiming.
Relatively. I haven't seen the number. Relatively.
There are different reports.
According to our reports, the turnout was good.
The turnout...
From our reporter, the turnout was good.
Precisely.
Percentage-wise.
So it depends on whose report you want to capitalize your argument.
But let's speak to this vote buying thing and the effect it has for me. And I think it's extremely important.
And there's no justifying it.
One, it's illegal. Two, it's not justifiable. But three, what that does to the psyche of a citizen who has been paid to cast a vote for a member of a particular party, you then have to work a lot harder, at least if I use the context of the work that we do, to get that citizen to think that they have agency to hold that elected official accountable. Well, you in a sense are paid for you've paid me to vote, I voted, then for 4 years you're on your own. And for me, that's a fundamental problem.
The good news is that, I mean, once it became clear that the incumbent governor had won, at least one of the candidates immediately congratulated him. And that's Usita Chidoka.
I didn't think he had an option.
As in from number
but at least, you know,
not the second, not the third.
I was trying to agree with you to the extent that, look, we are trying to make perfect our system. And we need as many years as possible to correct all this.
We're not correcting it.
Well, it's time now for a short break. We'll return to this when we have the opportunity again. It's time now for a short break here on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show. But do stay tuned. When we return, we'll look at other issues, including President Buhari and his presidential nominations, as well as the resumption of militant behavior in the Delta region. Don't go away.